Hello and welcome back to another big UC news show with me, David Dungay. Today we have a fantastic panel of guests for you. Let's do a quick round of introductions. We have Brue, welcome to the show. Craig Durr, Irwin Lazar, Evan Kirstel, Zeus, Kerravala, welcome. And of course my new co-host for this month, Mr. Kieran Devlin. Thank you for joining me all. Let's get into some hot UC topics, shall we? Where should we start? So, Zoom has been all over the news this summer, which has been great for us as a news outlet. But I wanted to talk about the latest news story where Zoom CEO Eric called out other vendors for charging a lot for AI features. I'm going to hand over to Kieran now. Kieran, what did you make of this story? Why are we seeing all these charges for AI features around the market?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. But to further context, in Zoom's latest earning call for this month, CEO Eric Wan celebrated AI Companion's successful integration across its collaboration portfolio while teasing its 2.0 phase of AI-enabled work. He emphasized that part of why customers seem to appreciate Companion is that it comes at no additional cost for paying subscribers. And to quote, not like some other vendors who have to charge the customer a lot, end quote, as Yuan puts it. I think this is really interesting, and it seemed to cause a stir on LinkedIn following the earnings call. I think in the context, especially the eye-catching one of Microsoft charging $30 per user per month for some of their Copilot services. Zoom underlining AI Companion is free seems like quite a shrewd PR move. Zeus, what's your take on this story?
Yeah, I don't actually have a problem with the vendors charging for it if it actually delivers the value. To me, and I do think the industry needs different tiers. I think for your typical knowledge worker, if it even gets you an hour a week back, $30 a month. I've talked to some users, it's a no-brainer. I mean, it's the best deal out there. It underscores kind of a bigger issue, Kieran, and though. From a vendor community, what becomes chargeable and what should be part of the standard AI feature set, right? There's certain things we use like virtual backgrounds. No one would think of charging for that, right? Now, perhaps down the road, you might have enhanced ones or something like that where you could add a fee or whatever. But to me, that seems like just a core part of the meeting platform. Anything that then becomes advanced, right? So you think of like transcriptions versus meeting notes. Maybe transcription should be free, but meeting notes is chargeable because there's a little bit more intelligence in that. But I think it's a bigger question for the industry is how this gets monetized. And what I don't want to happen to this industry is that we get in this mode where everybody has to give everything away just to keep their current licenses at flat, because that's bad. That's bad for everybody because it creates a deflationary effect where the vendors are pouring more and more money into R&D, but they're not making any more money, which in turn slows down innovation. And so I like Eric a lot, and I agree with a lot of things he said. And in this case, though, I think he's a little off base. I do think there are certain aspects that you should charge for if they add enough value, and it's up to the vendor to make sure that the value is being added. But it does raise the bigger question of what should be chargeable and what should be, a standard part of the feature set.
That conversation opens up a lot of interesting things. I agree with you, Zeus. But where and when does the line get drawn? We're going to talk later on about how, there's DOJ involvement, DOJ in terms of some other things. Could it ever be perceived that, for example, as an industry, we're withholding features and charging for them when we could be giving them away for free? Is there any type of collusion or something like that? I mean, I don't know if it's going to go that far, but what you're getting to, I think, is very important. Where is that line to be drawn between baseline entryway features versus advanced features that might deliver added value? It's a very tricky line.
It might be the other way around, Craig, where you have vendors who say, I'm going to give it away to try and put startup competitors out of business who are charging for some additional features that would definitely open up some legal concerns. I think for me, it's really impressive that Zoom has been able, I don't know if this is the right word, but to get away with giving away AI. AI is expensive. We've seen a number reports about how much it costs for a Google, for a Microsoft, or whoever to scale infrastructure to support the power needs and so on to be able to deliver AI services. And that's usually the justification that the vendors are using to say this is why we can't give it away. Zoom took a very different tack. They gave away AI from day one. And I remember being at their analyst event when they announced it, and there was a lot of trepidation that can they do this? Can they afford to do it over a long haul? And they didn't rule out that maybe someday they would have tiered service. But so far, they've been able to continue to drive earnings. They've been able to get it in the hands of people, very high utilization rates, and all without forcing people to decide, do I pay for this or not?
I think that raises a really good point that Eric is sort of backing himself into a corner here, that if he's saying nobody should be charging for AI, that sort of puts them in a position of they can't charge for AI in the future. And I think that's a little bit dangerous. I would stay away from making a big statement like that. But again, not all AI is the same. So that's sort of a blanket statement that I think is one I'd be careful about stating.
Yeah, I think every vendor is going to be sort of testing the waters when it comes to charging for AI. To big blockbuster announcements. Apple Intelligence evidently is going to test $20 monthly fee, maybe tiered in some way. We'll see in a week or so. Also, Amazon Alexa is relaunching Alexa as an LLM-based tool. Evidently, they're going to charge $10 a month for the privilege of using Alexa. I did a couple of unscientific LinkedIn polls. A few hundred people participated, and 90% were against any additional fees for either of those offerings. So again, those aren't enterprise offerings per se, but it's interesting that people will start really pushing back against this sprawl of additional service fees. And I wonder what they'll get away with charging.
The one thing I did want to mention, though, is don't lose sight that Zoom actually does have a chargeable AI offering. That's their revenue accelerator. So their strategy has been to take verticalized solutions and to monetize those. And who knows, there may be the potential to be moving out. But just recently, we were all at an event and we were introduced to a new person brought in to actually manage that revenue accelerator. So they're bringing some very strong leadership to that as well, and looking to grow that as well. So his statement does have some nuances to it because they are charging for some AI features.
Should we move on to Zoom Docs? Of course, another sort of element to this AI story. We saw Zoom adding AI features into their new documents offering as well. I don't know if anyone uses Zoom Docs in the room here. I haven't had the pleasure of using it, but of course we're seeing this being infused elsewhere in the market as well, namely Microsoft. Kieran, tell us a bit more about this story. What did you make of it?
Yeah, of course, as David alluded to, Zoom has announced the general availability of its new collaborative Gen AI-powered solution, Zoom Docs. As we mentioned before, it is powered by AI and Companion, which is one of the reasons Eric was so celebratory of its integration across the portfolio. It works similar to how Copilot can support Office 365 and how Gemini is being leveraged across Google Workspace. It does have productivity and collaboration features around automating menial tasks, specifically in document generation and editing. This feels like another feather in the cap for Zoom diversifying its portfolio as it continues to evolve into the collaboration all-rounder and away from the video conferencing on which it made its name. Irwin, what do you think of this story?
Yeah, I think it shows that the collaboration landscape, or at least the collaboration UI, is evolving. Today we work in chat, we work in email, we work in project management tools, we work in documents, and all of those tend to live separately from one another. What Zoom is trying to do with Zoom Docs is similar to what we're seeing out of vendors like Notion and a few others, where they're trying to create this common canvas where you can go in and collaborate and share content, tie it into meetings, potentially tie it into chat, so that you've got everything living in one space. I think another good example of that is when Slack added a canvas to each of the Slack channels. So now I don't have to say, click on this link to go look at the document and provide your comments. I can have that content living within the context of the chat. So I think it shows you that we're seeing a convergence of content, chat, potentially meetings, all being tied together and giving people a way to communicate and collaborate without having to switch between multiple different applications. So, again, I think that there's a lot of promise. We just published at Metrigy a study on Friday. Actually, we call it connected workspace, which is how we define these applications. And a lot of the challenge is just explaining what they are, but we're seeing more than 60% of companies that are looking at using these kind of applications. Again, typically project management tools that have some content capabilities and chat capabilities, or apps like Notion. So I think it's interesting that Zoom is the first one, I guess, along with Microsoft with Loop as another similar type of offering that you're seeing now that this content collaboration is starting to converge with more traditional forms.
Yeah, it's interesting that when they got into docs and even when they launched email, there's a lot of people scratching their heads. Like, that's almost been the unpenetrable area of Microsoft to disrupt, right? But I think the disruptive force here isn't the fact that they're making a better document or a better email platform. In fact, their email platform is not that great. But it is, to your point, the coming together of data, right? Even if I don't know if you've tried using Zoom Mail, but it's often the case where, just think from a search example, how often does somebody send you a message through Zoom, Zoom chat or WebEx or whatever, and then they sent you an email and you can't remember which, and then you got to search both, right? And so if you could just search one place and it searches across all your different types of content, think how beneficial that would be. Then if you extend that out to AI, right, then the value comes exponential there. And I think that's in a lot of ways the kind of underappreciated aspect of what Zoom is trying to do by bringing it together. I think that from a media perspective, Zoom's going after Microsoft Docs, right, or Word or whatever, gets a lot of the headlines, but there's a much kind of lower level AI intelligence play here at work.
It actually plays to the first story we talked about as well, too. How is Zoom's monetization strategy? I think it's to drive a lot of people back towards Suite. And what they're doing is chipping away at these value adds and pulling them into the feature set. In my mind, for better or for worse, Zoom is that very West Coast, software-centric, tech-forward company. And they're mimicking a lot of things from similar companies in that area. Irwin mentioned Notion, Asana. They actually also just announced that they're pulling, in partnership with Prezi video tools into their video offering as well, too. So these little delighters wind up being stickiness. And back to when they first introduced AI, for example, and we asked the question, how are you going to monetize it? They talked about driving people towards a suite. So I see this as a continuation of that strategy, pulling in some of these feature sets to help drive more suite sales of the entire Zoom portfolio.
So let's move on to our next story. I believe it's Slack and Box as a new integration there. And so Kieran, what's happening there and why is this significant?
Yeah, so Slack and Box have been long-time partners together, but recently they've expanded their partnership to allow joint customers to access unlimited Box AI queries directly in Slack. This will allow users to ask important questions and discover insights from Box files, effectively unifying file access and file sharing across the organization. I think what's really eye-catching about this is that it seems like quite an important and groundbreaking way to address AI integration silos. I was wondering, what are your thoughts on this, Irwin?
Yeah, I think we're seeing a theme, as Zeus mentioned when we were talking about Zoom Docs earlier, that you have this, the desire is to converge communication, collaboration applications into a single place where you can then apply AI to have be able to answer queries and summarize and create content all through one common data set. I think that's one of the challenges that companies are facing now as they're looking at AI today, which is, I go to Microsoft and I have to use Copilot. I go to Slack and I have to use their AI. I go to Google, I have to use Gemini. I have to use Zoom AI Companion. And all of that is creating, again, that potential for silos. So I think what Slack is doing with this integration of Box and then, the previous integrations that they've announced with their parent company, Salesforce, is trying to create that one-stop shop where I can go in and I can use AI to summarize information, to query it, to collaborate around it, all through one potentially interface without having to switch around to different interfaces. And hopefully that, from a user perspective, it reduces complexity. From a business perspective, it could potentially reduce cost.
Yeah, I like what they're trying to do. I don't know if it really solves a bigger problem, or I think it's one small step, I guess, for that. Box actually, I think, has a really interesting opportunity here, because if there's one vendor that is able to unify things, at least from a document perspective at a data level, it is Box, right? In fact, if you talk to Box customers, they actually do a better job of bridging content across the Microsoft suite than OneDrive does, right? And I've always thought they'd be an interesting acquisition candidate for somebody like a Zoom that's trying to, disrupt Microsoft a little bit more. But clearly, data management isn't something Microsoft or Google have ever done very well, right? SharePoint, Exchange, and those things work independently. Box does bring those things together, and for Slack to be able to tap into that now actually gives them some interesting capabilities. It's too bad Slack's owned by Salesforce. Honestly, I think they could have done a little bit more with it though.
Fantastic. Okay, well, so we move on to our last topic of today. It's a bit of a fun one. It's all about emojis. So I don't know how many of you use emojis in your own businesses. I use emojis, not excessively. I'm a kind of a thumbs up and a smiley face kind of guy. But Microsoft has just announced custom emojis, and I'm not quite sure what this means. Kieran, take us through the story. What's going on with emojis right now?
Yeah, I guess a light-hearted story after some heavy needling down into AI. Microsoft has launched custom emojis for Microsoft Teams. These are effectively bespoke emojis and reactions users can create themselves and add to their Teams app. Microsoft's stance on this is that these are emojis and reactions for users to better express their own personalities and branding. They're really heavily, dialing down on the idea that this is a valuable form of self-expression. But I guess they could also just be very, very light-hearted fun. And the idea that these are custom, they are bespoke, allows people to be even more creative with it and effectively expressing their own individuality. But what does the panel stand on this? Is this a valuable form of self-expression, a cringe attempt to engage the youth, or somewhere in between? Evan, we'll begin. What are your thoughts on emojis?
I'm glad to be the heavy hitter on this deep, important topic. So thank you for the question.
Speaking of youth,
Evan, not the youth, but I've given birth to a couple of youths, and one thing I've noticed is, again, this is a total generational thing. There were some interesting articles that the Gen Z, or if you want to call them that, can't write and really can't speak on the phone anymore. Literally, they lost their ability to write shorthand notes, and typing is sort of disappearing. And in parallel, they're really not that comfortable, speaking on the phone or on calls. And this is actually not a joke. It's kind of been documented. So emojis are sort of are picking up the slack for our breakdown in communication skills. And I think that's what it's about, and appealing to the new workers who maybe frankly don't like a lot of these tools. I mean, who does like Teams? So you can cut that out. Sorry. But, trying to make it more appealing to this next wave of workers. What does the panel think?
Yeah, I think it's just trying to make work a little more fun. I mean, we put a lot of seriousness into it. I do think it appeals to the younger workers. It'd be good though to, if we could make our own custom ones, like one of Mel Brue with no luggage and, Dave Michaels complaining and things like that. So
yeah. You don't need an emoji to see Dave Michaels
ironic or fun. That's just reality. So that, it's not a good example.
Yeah. But I do, wonder, like, are people going to spend a lot of time making custom emojis? Right. And in my demographic, I think of that as kind of a waste of time, but I do see how it could add some fun to the workplace. Companies can make ones for themselves, right? You could have, a branded person, like with a thumbs up or something like that in the contact center, that might add a little more personalization. So, who knows, anytime you can customize customer experience, I guess, or like experiences, it always adds a little bit. It just, you have to wonder how much R&D, I think about these kids that go through school, college, getting a degree in computer programming. It's like, what do you do for a living? I create emojis.
Mel and I both have a couple of younger, separate families, Generation A kids. I would just say this is such a very Sigma topic. This is so Sigma, This is just on top of it.
Yeah, I think like to say this point, I think adding some fun into communications is interesting. We were in my previous company, we started rolling out Slack. It's got to be about 7 years ago now, just to see if it was a suitable replacement for email. And what made it take off is the fact that we could send animated GIFs to each other, GIFs, however you want to pronounce it. That was the biggest use case. So within the first 2 hours, everybody was sending, stupid, funny images to one another. Back then, there was no filter, so you had to be really careful about what you sent and whether or not you quickly deleted it. But again, if you add fun to communications, maybe it gets people a little more comfortable. Look, most of us are working hybrid, remote. We're looking for different ways to interact. We're looking for different ways to engage. So I think anything that adds to that is a positive.
I think it makes work a lot of fun, right? Who doesn't love an emoji? Honestly, come on. So, well, look, let's leave that conversation there. I look forward to the next one. Before we go though, let's do a few event updates. Lots of events coming up. We're heading into the gauntlet, as I like to call it. On the UC side, we've got UC Expo, 2nd of October, GITEX, 14th of October, WebEx1, 21st of October, and then on the CX side, we've got another load of events as well. We've got Dreamforce, 17th of September. We've got Customer Experience and Digital Engagement Leaders Forum. We have CC Customer Contact Week, on the 7th of October. ICMI Contact Center Expo on the 21st. Digital Customer Experience Summit on the 13th of November. It's so much coming down the line.
Mobile World Congress, Las Vegas, on and on. Yeah.
It's an endless list of events. But I do hope to see some of you actually at these events. And if you're watching today and you see one of my panel or myself roaming around an expo hall somewhere, please come and say hi.
And then we got the Enterprise Connect AI Summits coming up too, right? So I'm curious to see how well attended that is. So.
Yeah. So, without further ado, let's say thank you to my panel. And so, Zeus, Evan, Irwin, Craig, and Mel, thank you so much. And thank you to Kieran for joining me this month. And I look forward to seeing you all at the next one.